Welcome to the Citizen Assembly Crucible, where we measure ideas posted on Agora against sets of principles authored or selected by members of Citizens Assembly. In tonight's forum, Staci Gustafson, that's me, will present a summary of Dan Bader's presentations on community mental health, the vicious cycle of poverty and malnutrition, with feedback according to the 36 holistic principles. The objective here is to create initiatives forged in balance and democracy. Our meeting format goes like this. First, the featured presenter reads an idea or essay that they have chosen in advance from the Agora website. Next, the co-presenter, and that is me. I will double tonight as presenter and co-presenter so we can get right to asking questions of Dan. Rates that idea against a set of principles chosen by them, also in advance. In this case, in the interest of time, I will rate this idea against only the first of the 36 holistic principles. Please save your commentary or questions about the principles themselves until after the meeting or during a specially called meeting to discuss edits to the 36 holistic principles. Let's start with a round of introductions. And we've got about 30 seconds apiece to tell our audience where you live and a little bit about yourself. I'll start, and I'm Staci Gustafson, and my major focus is holistic community problem solving, and that is a major part of what we're talking about tonight. I'm really excited about that. So thank you very much. Cynthia, can you go next, please?
Well, I sure can. My name is Cynthia Leonard. I'm a promoter and organizer for agora-ilp.org. That's agora-ilp.org and Citizen Assembly. I also do High Faith Thea's Kitchen on Radio Hydrogen, as well as a new show that I'm starting, which is called Univocity. And I'm really excited about that too.
Ooh, that's news to me. That sounds cool. I can't wait to hear about it.
Yeah, it just popped up yesterday, and it's been evolving ever since. So I'm really excited about it, and I actually have information to share now. So,
Awesome.
But I'm very grateful to be here. One love, infinite gratitude.
Great, thank you, Cynthia. Hopefully we can find out more about that later. Marcin, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Marcin. I'm a web developer. I work on the Salesforce platform, and I don't know, that's about me.
Very good. Thanks so much for being here. Thank you very much. And let's move on to today's idea. I will be reading an Agora idea here. Let me start screen sharing. This is Agora idea 992. Premise: people, often those in poverty, are unknowingly locked in a vicious cycle of malnutrition and lack of micronutrients, debilitating stress from lack of resources and support systems, and disempowering belief systems which wire our brains and send us chemical signals that make us react in maladaptive ways. If we can put the pieces of the puzzle together, we can move past this cycle into a healthier society based on healthier individuals. Background: I have struggled my whole life with this feeling that I couldn't figure out how to make the right decisions that would keep me out of trouble with people during stressful situations. But over and over, I would find myself overcome with emotion that said, I must act on this. To not act would be impossible. And the result would be a strong emotional reaction like name calling, pointing out negative things, wanting to leave, shouting the other person down, which I would always regret. In the moment, I could not control my reactions. After the fact, I could always figure out a different way to have responded, and I wished I had just waited until I had calmed down. Then I was fortunate enough to hear 2 of Dan Bader's presentations on mental health, which explained to me why I did this. It was life-changing for me. They are presentations worth sitting through without interruption. They last about 1 to 2 hours each. However, I offer as healing legislation here my humble understanding that I have taken away from these presentations. Proper nutrition provides the body what it needs to handle stress and crisis. Improper nutrition, particularly lack of micronutrients, along with a lack of a support network and resources, can cause an untenable feeling as the body tries to tell you what it needs. People turn to chemicals like drugs and alcohol to dull the pain, which exacerbates their stress and lack of support and resources like family and work. Brains are programmed to keep us alive, and so based on our experiences as our brains develop, It stores information about a situation, it categorizes it for future use, and a chemical path is formed. The brain, in its attempts as a child to make sense of stressful things, may create maladaptive connections, which later create the release of chemicals designed to make us respond appropriately or safely. When faced with situations that remind us of past trauma, some of these chemicals can make us feel an overwhelming urge to fight or run. While they are coursing through our body, we feel these urges so strongly it is very difficult to do other than fight or run. However, there are adaptive things we can do to relieve these maladaptive pathways and reactions. Addressing this includes emotion management, boundary setting, and satisfaction of needs. The solution that I recommend is the dissemination of Dan Bader's presentations to educate all people about this universal human issue. And I recommend Dan Bader's presentation, The Building Blocks of Mental Health, which I will share with you about 8 slides here. So slide 28, this is the 4 need areas. They are financial or material stability, emotional support, community involvement, and individual development. Our needs must be minimally satisfied in order to obtain and sustain mental health. What was really important to me that I learned about this presentation was about anger. And here's a slide that shows the emotion of anger carries with it frustration, physical discomfort, disrespect, unfairness, loss, and the disrespectful, just one second here. And the way that that can manifest, so if you have an angry thought, it could be because you have no fear of consequences, or an action urges disrespectful attack, or the thought, the object of the anger is completely bad. Disrespectful expressions can be violence, threats of violence, or abandonment, or attacking a person's identity. A respectful expression of anger addresses the frustration, disrespect, or unfairness that has triggered the anger. And this can be what you can do to carry this out as an emotional timeout. Take enough time and space to allow the bodily manifestation of the anger to dissipate. As the adrenaline level comes down, you must counter automatic thoughts generated by the anger. You must remind yourself that the person you're angry at is not completely bad or wicked. You must also remind yourself of the consequences if you express your anger in an instinctual, disrespectful fashion. And then we have the anger displacement. Anger can be directed at the perpetrator, an innocent person, or oneself. If anger is chronically directed at innocent people, it is difficult to adequately take care of our human needs, and the consequent need deficiencies will probably result in a depressed mood. If anger is chronically directed at oneself, self-esteem suffers, anxiety problems will develop, and a depressed mood state will probably ensue. There are 5 main emotions, and what I have chosen to talk about are anger and interest, excitement. They just seemed to be the most relevant to me for the most difficult emotions or it seemed to hit me the most. Interest, excitement. You have, these things can grab your attention. Goals, novelty, drives like hunger, thirst, sex, affection, intimacy, acquired addiction. Object is perceived as all good, all important, all necessary, totally positive. This makes it extremely interesting, and you put your focus there. It focuses the attention and urges acquisition and or exploration of the object. Disregard for negative consequences can come from this. This interest, excitement can remove shame and anxiety. So you get these, my understanding, and Dan can correct me if I'm wrong, but when this happens, you get the chemicals in your body that create this disregard for negative consequences and focus all of your attention on these urges.
Yeah, that's correct. You get a huge, bath from the dopamine neurotransmitter which kind of that's the physiological underpinning of it.
Great. So the interest and excitement equals the positive emotion we feel when we are focused on accomplishing a goal or acquiring something we desire. Interest equals less intense, excitement more intense. This emotion energizes us to acquire or explore the object of our attention. Interest excitement is triggered by drive states, goals, and novelty. It generates automatic thoughts that the focus of the attention is all positive, all important, all necessary, and like anger, it also generates thoughts which disregard or minimize the potential negative consequences that can follow. The interest excitement timeout says, take sufficient time for the anticipatory excitement, enthusiastic arousal to subside. While on the timeout, recalibrate the automatic thoughts that accompany the feeling. Remind yourself that the focus of your attention may be good, but is not nearly as positive as it feels. Also remind yourself of any negative consequences that could occur if you act on the feeling. Remind yourself that no beliefs should be crystallized or decisions made when the intensity of the emotion is strong. Then I'm going to skip to slide 24. And this talks about alcohol and emotions. Alcohol inhibits shame and anxiety, the two emotional energies that are concerned with consequences. Alcohol disinhibits anger, sadness, and interest excitement. Anger and interest excitement remove a concern for consequences on their own. Alcohol plus anger or interest excitement creates very unrestrained impulsive behavior. And I think we're all very familiar with that. So let me go back to if we measure the agreement and the support for this idea in Agora, just raise your hand whether you agree or support it. And well, we've got me and Dan, of course. And all right, so
Marson too, Stacy.
Oh, Marson has his hand up.
Oh, he's practically dancing over there. You don't see that?
Thank you. All right. So let's open the floor now. Oh, I'm sorry. I wanted to, so the Crucible assesses these ideas in relation to the holistic principles. And the first 10 principles, first 2 through 9, it really, this idea supports the principles in the way it supports people from the ground up and with education and not jail or penalization. And so I just want to bring up principle number 1 is diminish no one or nothing or do no harm. So I think clearly this is going to do a lot in reducing the harm to individuals affected like this. But I think we can anticipate that there are a lot of services and industries that make money from this that maybe we could say reduced. Now, we're not saying we never want to do any harm. Any step forward is going to bring a vacuum in its wake. But does the harm that is done, is it outweighed by the good that is done? And so we will throw that out for debate right now. Cynthia, did you have your hand up?
No, I was waving to Joe, but I did put a question in the chat if you want to read that.
Okay.
Well, wasn't really a question, it was more of a statement. Because when you were talking about anger, it seems like you're talking about the kind of anger that is actually fear projecting itself. People fear having violence inflicted upon them. So as a self-defense mechanism, that's like their first go-to kind of a thing. However, I would say that there is such a thing as righteous anger. And, although violence should never be the answer, there are times when people are completely justified in being angry and should be encouraged to express it in a healthy manner.
Could I comment on that, Cynthia?
Oh, yes, Dan, this is now quite an open forum. Please go ahead and respond to the questions that people have. We'd like to keep it to 2.5 minutes, but if there aren't any other questions pending, you are welcome to keep going.
Okay, so Cynthia, couple of thoughts relating to the point that you're making, which which I understand as there are certain situations, let's say, where the amount of disrespect and or unfairness is so severe or maybe so chronic that an angry response, which I would define as being disrespectful, maybe is called for. And by the way, disrespectful, the way I define it is, it's violence, threats of violence, or abandonment, or attacking a person's identity, their race, their religion, their ethnicity, their appearance, their intelligence, whatever. Generally features that we can't do a whole lot to change up, generally. So, but here's the thing. So I would say, and what my diagram represents is, if you are triggered into anger by the natural stimuli, frustration, physical pain or discomfort, unfairness, disrespect, or loss, you're going to feel anger. But instinctive anger is going to be disrespectful. In other words, it's one of these things where you just have to know that and understand it. And what a person should do, in my mind anyway, is practice expressing your anger in a respectful fashion. On an interpersonal level, if somebody disrespects you, treats you unfairly, or frustrates you, you address the unfairness, the disrespect, etc. You don't go to violence. A lot of people, when they get disrespected, and usually that means their identity is being attacked in some way, a lot of people are just socialized to go immediately to violence or to threaten violence. But, and that's just instinctive and natural. But if you want to have good mental health, you've got to learn not to do that. That needs to be the exception that maybe happens once in a while. Now, obviously, if your back's against the wall and you have to fight, you'll fight. But that's unusual circumstance. Staci.
I wanted to say, I did happen to notice in the slides, it said that there is actually respectful anger that is needed in setting boundaries.
Yes, absolutely. So when and this is the second building block of mental health. Emotion management's number one, setting interpersonal boundaries between people, and also what I call intrapersonal boundaries, being able to stop yourself from having an angry reaction towards yourself that is disrespectful, attacking your own identity. This is very bad for mental health. And people should learn when it starts up, to put the brakes on, and then, say you're angry at yourself because you frustrated yourself, you're disappointed in yourself. Well, express that in your mind to yourself, or if you verbalize it to yourself, do it in a respectful form. And people must learn to do it. It takes rehearsal and practice, because the instinct is, to talk to yourself like, you're an effing loser, you're worthless, you'll never learn, with this kind of angry tone, even if it's silent in your mind. And this is not good for mental health. And people have to learn to be able to control that, have it be the exception rather than the rule. I used to tell people, yes, Cynthia.
Well, I would both agree and disagree with you that instinctual response, I would say, is absolutely a fear trauma response. It's not even really anger. It's just a projection of the fear and trauma that one has experienced over the course of their life, representing itself in any given circumstance triggered by emotion. And I kind of have a disagreement with your use of the term disrespectful, because disrespectful can mean a myriad of things, and as you're defining it, with violence and derision and things of that nature, that would be the extreme of it. But it's like it's very wide and a very wide field that you're talking about there. I would say if it comes to violence and derision and things like that, that's just fear projecting itself, fear and trauma projecting itself.
Yeah, so you know, the issue of trauma conditioning. So for example, lots of people experience a lot of abuse, you know, in families, in neighborhoods, at school, etc. They get abused by people, they get bullied by people, they get pushed around, they get slapped around. Now, so as a person gets older, of course, there will, for most people, come a time when they can sort of defend themselves, you know, with most people in one way or another, theoretically. But but again, the thing is, if I get taught by, let's say, my parents or people I live with when I'm a child, if I get taught that when something happens that is frustrating, the person lashes out in violence, you know, then what I'm going to be taught is that's how you are. When you get frustrated, if you can get away with it, because you think you can push somebody around or take advantage of them physically, then you go to that. And that's not a good lesson. That's not good role modeling. But people we got to be real. That's what so many people get exposed to. And not only that, they get exposed in a lot of communities, like here in Chicago. They grow up in areas where street gangs dominate communities. And so particularly for young boys coming up, they're already perhaps conditioned to react violently if they think they can get away with it. But then they are socialized further as they go into adolescence or pre-adolescence, that when you're disrespected, you do go to violence. And if you're not capable of doing that, you're not going to be part of our group. In other words, that's part of what you need to do to be accepted. Now, these are problems which don't do anybody any good, and it's not really necessary. Now, the thing about fear, you know, if you're afraid that something is going to happen to you, generally, you know, I would look at that as, you know, you're going to try to escape or avoid that happening. And so I differentiate in the emotions. You know, I have one for anxiety, which is about a future threat, which could be very, you know, in the very near future. And then you have a different response than anger. You know, anxiety can put down anger. It is possible. Generally speaking, anger will take away anxiety. And so a lot of people, they might be, you know, feeling somewhat anxious. You know, maybe they feel they need to say something, and they go to anger to take away the anxiety or sometimes the shame. Yes.
So Joe had a few questions. I think it relates to this, and see if it does. Are you suggesting, there are three questions here. Are you suggesting we educate people about handling their emotions? Is this because people won't understand what's being communicated if you leave out the emotional component? And do all instinctive anger responses harken back to trauma?
I'm not sure I heard the complete what you just said, Staci. But here's the thing about trauma. You know, if you look at PTSD, you know, which became a kind of almost celebrity mental health disorder at a certain point. You know, originally PTSD was, you know, associated with trauma that happened, you know, in war theaters, you know, people who were exposed to combat. But of course, it then, of course, could be easily generalized to lots of other people.
I'm sorry, Dan, I'm going to interrupt you because Cynthia has her hand up.
Yes, all of those things that you described, societal conditioning, all of that stuff, that's trauma. And trauma generates that fear response that you're suggesting is anger, and that's the distinction I'm making. And are you suggesting that anxiety is not a response to trauma as well? Is that the claim you're making? And there was one other thing. Hopefully, it'll come back to me, but. That's all I have for right now because my brain's not working.
You know, so look, in real time, the emotions roll very, very quickly. You know, I mean, it's not like you know, you can be angry, then you could become afraid if your anger gets you into a situation where now, you know, you're going to be afraid that you can't handle something. The emotion, but the thing about what happens with trauma, PTSD, and I had a lot of clients, you know, I had people who'd been, you know, shot 4 or 5 times. You know, but here's what has to happen. You know, that person needs to learn to manage the fear, anxiety, and they also have to learn to manage the anger if that's part of their repertoire. You have to learn to manage all of the emotions. And you also have to know how to set boundaries appropriately with people so that you do not have to, you know, go to fight or flight, as you like to put, you know, might put it. And that's an essential kind of thing. And you know, so I differentiate between anger and anxiety. You know, they're 2 different emotions. You're saying that in your mind, anxiety or fear triggers anger. That's what you're saying. But of course, the question becomes, what is a person afraid of? So give me an example, Cynthia.
Well, depending on the situation, it's fear of harm and or death. That is generally the two driving factors behind any fear response. And if you feel like you're being attacked, even if it's only verbally, that's still trauma being inflicted, and it will make your body respond as if your life is being threatened. And I remember the other thing I was going to say, if there's time, can I say the other thing? I am very curious what you mean by when you say that PTSD was like a celebrity thing, because I can tell you it's real and it's bad, and you don't have to go to war to get it. So I'm just kind of wondering what you meant by that, please.
Yeah, no, I'm not. I was using that. It wasn't maybe the best. What I'm saying is, you know, by celebrity disorder, what I meant was it became elevated in the culture. It became something that, you know, people, you know, we had, you know, if you remember during the 1990s, the late 80s, 1990s, we had this tremendous, it was amazing. We had this period of time where what I would call the celebrity disorder became multiple personality disorder, you know, what they call dissociative identity disorder. In other words, people would, you know, they would be able to kind of shift into different personas. Sometimes it wouldn't even be voluntary, and it needed to be treated in a certain kind of a way. And it was a big deal, and it was, you know, popular through the media and everything. But at the end of the day, what happened with that, the reason it just suddenly disappeared was because maybe in the mid 90s, but somewhere around that time, what happened was it became very clear that a lot of it was the result of suggestion on the part of the therapists who were dealing with this because of the way they had been essentially taught and socialized. You know, I mean, if you look at it, it was one of the most, you know, I had a few clients who had multiple personality disorder. It was well established, you know, they didn't come to me new. They'd already, you know, been in it for, you know, a decade or more. But the thing is, this is what happens when it starts to get a disorder. An emotional problem or set of issues gets expressed through the media, in movies, et cetera, Three Faces of Eve from way back, and so on. But it just simply dissolved very quickly once it was shown that it was due to suggestibility.
I wanted to go back a little bit to something that Cynthia was saying and then see if she's had her question answered. Can you teach people who have, you know what, I'm sorry, I'm going to go to Marston's comment here. We were talking about you're in a really bad situation and you're having an angry reaction. And Marston says, jumping to conclusions, mind reading, you assume that people are reacting negatively to you when there's no definite evidence for that. Future telling, you arbitrarily predict that things will turn out bad. And so then I wanted to ask Cynthia, are you talking about, you're talking about a real life-threatening situation, or you're talking about something that if you hadn't had a previous trauma, you wouldn't have the reaction of it being life-threatening?
I'm not sure I know anybody who's not had a previous trauma, so I really can't answer that question. Every person I know has been traumatized in one way or another just by virtue of living in this country. Here's the way I look at it. The energy that is the essence of self is a light, and it shines. And when it shines through a prism, it is fundamentally altered without ever realizing it's altered. And to kind of speak to your point, Dan, when you were talking about it being celebrity because it was being diagnosed, most people think that what they're doing is perfectly normal until somebody tells them that it's not normal. Like a bipolar person might think that those high highs and low lows are a perfectly normal way of being unless they get completely out of control. Yet that doesn't make them not bipolar. They just haven't been diagnosed. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Let's look at, again, the three building block kind of a framework. So again, all three building blocks need to be addressed. That's emotion management. And I break it down into 5 emotions. It could be broken down into 16 if you want to do that. But the simpler it is, the easier it is to figure out. And, you could say, well, a person is just irritable, they're in a rage, this or that. But the thing is, you have to learn to manage the emotions to some degree. And the only way you learn to do that is by rehearsing and scripting how you're going to deal with certain situations. Otherwise, you go to instinct. And instinct, when it comes to anger or fear, but with anger particularly, you're going to get a lot of problems. So let me just give one example to hook the 3 building blocks together. So if I have an anger management problem, which I would define as I get violent, I make threats, and the threats can be verbal or nonverbal. I can go ahead and just, slam my arm down on a desk or pick up a glass and throw it not at the person I'm angry at, but at the wall away from them. That is a big threat of violence. I'm letting them know that, I'm almost at the point where I'm going to do to you what I just did to that glass, And so most people are going to go to that. Or they're just going to insult the person. They'll attack their appearance. I can't stand looking at you. Get out of my sight. This kind of thing. And of course, in the kind of world we're living in right now, of course, anything that would attack a person's ethnicity, gender identity, or anything like that is considered to be pretty disrespectful. But it's always disrespectful. Any attacks on identity, the way I'm looking at it. And so if you don't want to go there, it's going to be a problem, because if you express your anger disrespectfully, and that's the normal thing you do, it's instinctive, and in that sense, it's normal. But if you do it, you're going to have trouble with the 3rd building block, which is getting your needs as a human being taken care of. How am I going to have material stability? I'm just talking relevant to the culture we live in today, unless I have a way of obtaining an income. Usually that means some sort of work. Now, how am I going to work or survive in a workplace if I have a serious anger management problem? And so if I can't hold a job, or I can't finish, let's say, an educational program because I get too angry, then I'm going to suffer chronic emotional pain, because my needs as a human being are not being taken care of. And of course, I don't know how to manage emotions in the first place. And then when I have this chronic anger, I'm likely to lash out at anybody I can when I can. It's a disaster. And if you have chronic emotional pain going on, like so many people do in so many communities, what they do is they take drugs, they drink alcohol, they smoke cigarettes all day, eat comfort food. You can do so many things. They engage in addictive, repetitive behavior to keep the emotional pain down. And so all three of those levels need to be taken care of. And it's got to be everything, because otherwise you're going to remain very vulnerable. Now, I think the emotion management is probably the real key building block, because you have to be able to, so let's say you're somebody living in poverty, okay? And you don't feel that you may have enough to get through a given month, let's say. Well, you're going to be walking around with chronic emotional pain, because, and this is something I remember, we kind of got into it a little bit when I was doing that conscious, unconscious mind, remember? And you were saying, well, no, that doesn't register with me the way I've understood conscious, unconscious. But it's the thing about the unconscious mind, as I'm defining it, is that when your needs for material stability, emotional support, community involvement, individual development are not being taken care of, you get chronic emotional pain. When it's usually when you're in near poverty or poverty, that will be anxiety about not being able to have what you need. And it will also be frustration, anger, because you want those things and you can't really get them very easily. Yes.
Well, would you say if any one of those blocks was put into place that the other two would follow suit? I mean, one would naturally lead to another, and then the next one?
Could you repeat that? I wasn't able, I'm having a little trouble hearing.
If you were to establish any one of the building blocks that you're talking about, would not the other two naturally follow?
No, they actually wouldn't necessarily follow. So for example, let's say I teach somebody to manage anger. I teach them to manage anger successfully and anxiety, both. They know how to do that. Now, that will up the odds that they can get their needs taken care of. Yes, and in that sense, it will follow. But they have to be able to manage all of the emotions, right? All five. And the thing is, if you can do that, then when you're in a situation where you can't take care of your need, maybe you can't get out of near poverty like tomorrow. It's going to take some work on your part, and things are going to have to change. So until you can do that, until you can put the pieces together to solve the lack of material stability problem, you have to manage your anger, you have to manage your anxiety, and so on. And that's necessary. Otherwise, it's not going to be good. And I could break down. You can give me a situation. For example, you can give me any kind of, somebody suffering this, or this is what's going on in a community. I could pretty much break it down in terms of three building blocks, conceptual, framework.
Okay. Do you want me to do that now?
Sure.
Okay. I'll use my personal life experience because that's the only thing I know really well. I was supposed to be getting SSDI because I had a serious accident, and 2.5 years later, I was still getting $39 a month. And then when they finally upped it, they upped it to $179 a month, which somehow a person is supposed to exist on. All of my savings had been eaten up, due to the accident that I had. I had no visible means of support. And quite frankly, it wasn't that long. Well, it's been a while. It's been 2.5 years now. I was the last time I was suicidal, like calling the suicide hotline suicidal. And then I took the time to do the self-reflection, self-correction process, which I still continue to this day. And I've even had people point out to me that they can see me becoming a better person as I go. Has my life experience changed? Nope. I still get no money every month. But what I did was heal myself. I found the source of my suffering. And once you see it and acknowledge it, then you can go anywhere from there.
Okay, so I'll do a very quick breakdown, in terms of the 3 building blocks. But, that would be under the assumption that, it was understood, all of it. So when somebody is suicidal, when somebody's having suicidal ideation for whatever the circumstances, usually the person is going to have certain very repetitive thoughts, and they may be associated with sadness, the emotion of sadness and loss. They could be associated with a combination of sadness, loss, and shame, guilt, a kind of mix there. But here's what happens to people. They start, let me, I don't know about your example, but I'll just give a typical example that of somebody who's having suicidal ideation. They're very depressed. And what they're usually believing is that their situation is pretty hopeless. They don't see a way out of their circumstances, and they feel relatively helpless about being able to do anything about it. And from the 3 building blocks point of view, the emotion of sadness is an instinctive response to losses. And what it's trying to do is to get you to accept a permanent loss. But if a loss is not permanent, it's temporary, or sometimes it's not even a loss at all, but it's been misidentified as a permanent loss, then you get into trouble. So for example, let's say that somebody believes, let's say that somebody's spouse or somebody's partner has passed away, and now they've lost the most, let's say, the most important person in their life. So they usually are going to go to something, they might start having thoughts like, oh my God, what am I going to do? I can't exist without this person. What's going to happen to me, especially if there's certain kind of dependencies, could be material, that kind of thing. And they have these thoughts over and over, and they have the thought, I don't know what to do. I can't do anything. Now, this is where the issue of belief crystallization comes in. Because if the person, I can't predict for any given person, but if somebody has a repetitive thought like, I have no future, which is a cardinal kind of thought in a depression, there's no future for me. Okay, maybe it only takes one person to have that thought, I don't know, 10 times, somebody else 30 times. But at a certain point, the danger is it's going to crystallize into a belief. Once it becomes a belief, it's very difficult to get it unpacked and to take it away. Because once you have a belief, and this is part of the 3 building blocks, it's, in a way, is the issue of beliefs. And so once a person has a belief, like I have no future and there's nothing I can do about it, and somebody tells me, like I used to do when I was doing therapy, I'd go ahead and I'd say, no, think about this. You're really good at this, or something like that, saying something like that to a person. And they would basically, because they have the belief, that there isn't any future and they really can't do anything. They've convinced themselves, and it's now beliefs. What they will say to me is either they'll minimize what it is I'm pointing out to them, or they will rationalize it away. Like, for example, what a common thing would be me, the therapist, they'd say, oh, Dan, you're a therapist. Your job is to give us hope. And that's all you're doing. But you know perfectly well that you don't really believe even what you're saying. Yes, Staci.
So is there a conclusion that helps that instance?
Yeah, basically, so what the person needs is they need to be taught that once you've crystallized a belief, however it comes to you, there's different ways. As children, we get the beliefs just programmed in. We're receptive to it from the authority figures, the elders in our community, that kind of thing, or families. What you have to do is you have to, first of all, understand that since you've got a belief, you have to do a couple of things. You have to look at the evidence that goes against, that contravenes the belief that you have. You have to do that. And then you have to check yourself when you quickly go to rationalizations and minimizations of the evidence. And that's a necessary process. And yes.
We're running out of time here. There's another show after this. I just have this desire to get one more thing in here. Is it ever okay to exhibit a strong, angry reaction?
Well, I think that the way I would put it is, be careful. I mean, I'm not going to say it's not, it's going to happen. It certainly happens with me. It happens with me even now, depending on the circumstance. But the thing is, I'm going to check myself as quickly as possible. I used to tell people, for example, when you're driving in your car, don't let yourself have those little road rages when nobody can hear you, so to speak, in your car. You don't want to keep yourself conditioned to react to any frustration or perception of disrespect with an angry, little temper tantrum. I'm not going to say that, look, I'm all for self-defense. If somebody is physically doing something to you, and then, I'm all for somebody physically defending themselves. That's fine. But what I'm saying is, I think you ought to be careful about your temper tantrums, because it's going to reverberate in the other person. You may think you're entitled to yell at somebody or threaten somebody. Oh, yeah. But the problem is they may take that as being very disrespectful and unfair. And normally what they're going to want to do, if they can't do it right in the moment, is retaliate against you at some point in time. And it just sets up this horrible kind of environment for a person. I would recommend that you don't express your anger. That doesn't mean you can't be strong. I used to use an example. I'd say somebody goes ahead and they tell me, Dan, I don't like the way you're dressed or something, or I don't like the way you look or whatever. Now that's the person's opinion that they have of me. Now I can't change that. It's not like I can brainwash them to think differently about me. But what I'm going to tell them in a very strong way is, I'd really appreciate it if you keep that opinion to yourself. I'm not going to forget what you think, but just keep it to yourself. I don't want to hear it repetitively, because if I get it thrown at me repetitively, that's going to undermine my mental health. I can't allow somebody to do that to me. And I'm going to be strong, but I'm not going to be disrespectful.
I love that. I want to give Cynthia one last chance to say, ask anything that you didn't get answered before we move to closing remarks. Okay, she is shaking her head. Nope.
No,
So
I'm good. I disagree with you, Dan, but I'm good.
That's
See,
what we're all.
I can disagree without getting angry. That's something I've been working on for a couple of years now.
Me too. Awesome. All right. Well, let's go to closing remarks. And Cynthia, you want to go first?
Well, hills, yeah. My name is Cynthia Leonard. I am a promoter and organizer for agora-iop.org. That's agora-iop.org. Look for me on Hypatia's Kitchen on Radio Hydrogen, as well as Univocity. And you can also find me doing podcasts on the Incredible Mohawk. I am doing Bud Talk and Red Man White Lies.
That sounds awesome. Thank you so much, Cynthia. Your contributions tonight were key. Thank you. Joe, do you have some closing remarks for us?
Yeah, I can't wait to watch the video. Brain fart, I recorded the time as 5 p.m. for today, even though I know it's 3:45. So thank you all of you who did show up. I think something was in the air of like three of the four crew weren't able to come. So Staci, thank you for holding it down. Dan, do appreciate the time you put in and doing all this work to learn as much as you can and teach us.
Thank you very much, Joe. Marcin, did you have any final remarks you wanted to make?
Yeah, I just want to say that I'm glad to be here because a lot of this stuff ended up being really relevant to my current situation. I'm high in demand when it comes to my technical skills, but I end up downplaying those a lot, and I'm in a constant state of disarray and stuff. I also want to say I posted a checklist of cognitive distortions in the chat. If you guys want to look at that, I thought it was really good. My friend suggested that for my particular depression. Yeah, really glad to be here. Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much for joining us. That was wonderful. And I'll give my closing remarks and then turn it over to Dan. I never cease to be amazed and learn things from you, Dan, and I hope that you will help me disseminate your stuff. I think it is really key, and I'm sorry we didn't get a chance to go into the battles that you have encountered in trying to disseminate this information when you had the correct ears and the correct people to hear about it. So we should do that another time as well. Thank you very much. Dan, I'll turn it over to you.
Yes. So the 3 building blocks of mental health. It's a lot of material. It's maybe not that many slides, but it covers a lot. And the idea of it always was to give people a psychoeducation such that they could acquire the skill sets necessary to pretty much prevent themselves from being plagued with a chronic mental health emotional disorder. In the spirit of public health prevention. And also to be able to apply it to communities, because I can, the mental health systems that are in place are completely set up to give a person medication, if possible, and not really teach them necessarily, even in therapy, not even teach them the kinds of skill sets they need to manage their lives and their emotions. And what happens to people is that they end up going to therapy for an extensive period of time. They may like the therapist, or they take medication for years, but because they are still suffering deprivations, they still create problems for themselves by their behaviors, etc. And the idea is to essentially change the way that people view mental health problems. And anyway, that's the goal. And I would just say, in addition to the 3 building blocks of mental health, I also have a pretty comprehensive presentation on depression, hoarding, which is a new thing, hoarding, and also on schizophrenia, psychotic disorders. A lot of it will integrate parts of the 3 building blocks, of course, but you know, so thank you so much for letting me present, as I've been away from mental health for some piece of time, and it feels really good to be able to get back into it. And you know, Staci, again, thank you so much for your interest and giving me a little bit of assistance here. Really appreciate that.
Wonderful. Thank you so much again, Dan. Let me just wrap up here for our viewers. If you liked this idea, don't forget to support it in igora-ilp.org. Also in Igora, you will find information for our upcoming meetings. And finally, like our page and join our group Citizen Assembly on Facebook. Staci is available to comment about the 36 holistic principles or even help you develop a set of your own. Contact us for more info. Thanks, everybody.